Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all. Our interview series continues. Very excited to welcome this week's guest. She's the host of The Kim Iversen Show on Rumble and YouTube. You all know who she is. Kim Iversen. Kim, pleasure to meet you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. Great to meet you finally.
Yeah.
So let's get right into it. We're just talking a little before we came on about the apocalyptic conditions in LA. So we're glad to be here in New York.
And we mean weather. We were talking weather, but
yes.
there are definitely other apocalyptic.
Oh, yeah. If that doesn't get us, something else will.
Right.
Mountain lions, all that.
The list is long. Yeah.
All right. So you, we have a lot of overlap with our audience. Most of our audience probably is familiar with you, but just a little background. So you started out doing more mainstream commercial radio before you decided to go into politics. Why did you make that turn, and do you regret it at all?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I worked in terrestrial commercial radio. So I worked for the big. I was with iHeart, was the last company that I was with. Prior to that, I was with a company called Entercom, which is now Odyssey. So I was with big corporate radio. I got my start there out of college. Like anybody who goes into radio, we've all, like Glenn Beck, if you're going to look at his background, it's the exact same. We start off as interns, and we work our way into the promotions department, where we go and we pass out stickers and put up posters, and we kind of work our way towards getting some sort of a training to be on air, where we get a weekend slot if they're willing to give us Sunday nights at 2 a.m., to throw us on air, and then work our way getting larger and larger time slots in radio, and also moving around quite a bit. So radio is one of those jobs where you have to move all over the country. We call it chasing call letters. Like we're just adding call letters to our resume as we go around the country trying to get jobs. Because if you want a different time slot, you usually have to go to a different city, a smaller city, and then you kind of work your way up. So I did that all throughout my 20s, like out of college and into my mid 30s. I was doing radio, and I actually for about 10, maybe the last 7 or 8 years, the last 8 years of doing radio, I actually was a syndicated radio talk show host. So I was broadcast on 50 cities across the country at night doing. Some markets, it was a 5-hour show from 7 to midnight. Other markets, we produced it as a 2-hour full-on talk show. So are you familiar with, and this shows everybody's age because the younger people do not know, but do you know Dr. Drew and Loveline? Are you familiar with that?
Sure.
You are, but okay. So the show I did was it was a Loveline, but for women. And it was broadcast on these kind of, music radio stations across the country. And I actually even guest co-hosted Loveline with Dr. Drew for a week on K-Rock, which was really, it was based out of K-Rock, but it was syndicated. So I did that for a while, and my show did really well. It was, a syndicated show, but I was in my mid 30s, and there was a couple of things. First, when you're syndicated, you don't have to move around the country as much anymore collecting call letters, but it's always a risk that you'd have to move around, or a company would sell your show off to another company, and you're going to have to get a studio somewhere else. And I didn't really want to be moving around the country anymore, chasing call letters, even though I had actually been quite stable for those 8 years being in syndication, because I was based out of Austin, Texas for half of the time. And then I requested the move to Los Angeles to be closer to family. But also radio is, just like all mainstream media right now, all of the legacy media, like radio, newspapers, television news, it's all dying,
Right.
And I was in my mid 30s thinking, all right, I've reached pretty much, this career this is all you can accomplish. Is syndication is really the end game for it. So am I going to be sitting here? Do I imagine myself sitting here, for the next 30 years doing do I think one, radio is going to be around for 30 more years where people are listening to it? And two, am I going to get bored for the next 30 years sitting here doing the same thing I've been doing for the last 8 years? This is a long time to be doing this one thing. Right. So I ultimately decided not to renew my contract. The company was shocked. They really did not understand why. And they kept upping it. They were like, what if we paid you double? And I was like, no, I won't stay for double. I'm out, guys. I want to talk about something different. I don't want to be doing this Loveline thing for women. And even Dr. Drew switched, right? He switched to politics. So I was like, I don't really want to be sitting here talking about sex, love, and relationships as I get older and older and older. It's fun. It's an interesting topic, it's a great time, but it's, I'm interested in politics. I want to talk about things that are more important or deeper. Not that, relationships are actually quite important.
Do you think that's going to be the trajectory for the Hawk Tua girl? She has a podcast
Yeah,
now.
probably.
Start out there, she'll be doing politics
exactly.
eventually.
And then I have to watch over my shoulder for Hawk Tua girl, right? As you're in this radio industry, you're going to eventually be replaced by somebody more salacious. And so I ultimately decided to just not renew the contract, and they tried everything to get me to stay, and I didn't want to stay, and they were shocked, and I decided I took a year off trying to figure out how I was going to go into politics exactly, into political talking, how I was going to make that transition. And then a year later, I launched my YouTube show. So that was January of 2019. And I honestly, when I did it, I thought, I don't think anyone's going to listen to me, because for that year, as I was learning more about politics, and I took a side job for a political media online outlet, and they had me writing some newsletters and articles and doing some podcasts, like saying the news on a podcast kind of a thing. And I was just doing it to learn. And while I was learning, I realized, and I thought I was a hardcore Democrat liberal. That's what I thought. But as I was researching during that year, I was like, wait a minute, they want me to write this story about something that, Trump said. Oh, he said this, it's circulating all over the news. And then I would go and I'd actually watch the entirety in order to do the research to write the piece. And I'd be like, wait a minute, what they're saying he said, he didn't say. And, he said this other thing. And it was just, that happened every day. I would discover that the liberal media was really, truly lying to us.
Right.
So during that year, I was researching and I was thinking, oh my gosh. And by the end, the company, I had worked my way up at that little internet company to being like basically a founder and partner of it. And then my co-founder and I just could not see eye to eye anymore, because I had changed. And then when I launched the YouTube show, I thought, I don't know if anyone's gonna, I don't know where I am politically. I think I'm a progressive, but I'm not in line with all these others. So I'm not 100% certain. So it was really scary, but I launched my YouTube channel in 2019, and actually, turns out a lot of people were seeing the same things I was and feeling the same way, because it grew and people like to watch. So here I am now. I kind of regret it. So long story at the end there. I kind of regret it.
I feel like everybody gets into this space thinking, I'll put up a YouTube channel no one's going to watch. And then they start watching. You're like, oh, man, now we got to do this. Wow.
Right. Yeah. Now we're in it. Now we're in it. Yeah.
But you're a jazz drummer, too, right? Do you keep up with your hobbies? You've won some competitions as a jazz drummer, as I understand.
Yeah, when I was younger, I played a lot. So I definitely put in my 10,000 hours as a jazz drummer throughout my life. But I stopped playing a little after college. So I went to college and I studied jazz performance in college as well. And we did a lot of competitions and it was great. But I stopped playing many years ago. So I still have a drum set up in my living room. So it's there to remind me that I should play and that I still am, technically a drummer. I just don't really drum much, but I do. Like last night I was out at a blues show. I like going to, and when I'm at those shows, I start to really think, in fact, last night I was researching a different drum set, thinking I need to get a new drum set and I need to start playing more often. So we'll see if I pick that one back up.
All right. Well, we're doing a cover song for Halloween, so we'll call you.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
So you were the first, I believe you were the first in a series of women with strong opinions to be fired from the Hill. And it seems like the final straw was when they blocked you from being on the Anthony Fauci interview, but you had been bumping heads with them a lot before that. Could you talk a little bit about what was going on over there and why that split happened?
Yeah. I was like a fill-in. It started off as a fill-in host, and I was just endlessly filling in. I was endlessly filling in to where, then they changed the logos and they started sticking my face front and center and everything. And we never actually did a deal. We never got to a contract.
Right.
We talked about it a lot, but they never would pull the trigger. And that was because behind the scenes, the management was saying that I was a conspiracy theorist for saying the vaccines didn't stop the spread. Such a conspiracy now, right? So now everybody knows that. And you can now say that on YouTube without getting in trouble. But back then you could not, and it was considered a conspiracy theory. So yeah, I butted heads a lot with my co-hosts. At the time, my main co-host was Ryan Grimm. And then we had a rotating like a libertarian or Republican would come in there. So for a while there, it was Alyssa Farah, who's now on The View.
All right.
Then it was, we had Rachel Bovard for a while there. And we also then ended up mostly with Robbie Suave, who's still on the show. And there was a lot of clashing between Ryan and I. He genuinely felt, that I was wrong on that subject. And we agreed on a lot of other stuff. But The Hill, ultimately, they just kind of kept me on even though they were using me as their front and center person, and I was the one that was getting the views for the show, because my radars on average were getting anywhere from 500,000 to 2 million views per radar. But they just wouldn't commit to me, to be honest. And that part was a lot of the behind the scenes that was going on, where they were dragging their feet, making a lot of promises, drafting contracts, then reneging on those contracts before we could sign them. And they just kept doing this over and over and over again. And finally, the last straw for me, when I realized they're not being very serious with me and they're just kind of using me, the last straw was when they booked Anthony Fauci for an interview. And I found out that Anthony Fauci, I got the rundown, we call it the rundown the night before, of who was going to be on the show. And I saw Anthony Fauci and I was like, what? We're interviewing Fauci? And I messaged the producers and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I can't wait. And then they called me and they said, well, the other hosts are going to interview Fauci. You are not going to interview Fauci, essentially. And I just said to them, guys, if you do that, there's no way. And the way they wanted to do it was I would have been there all morning filming the show, and then they literally would have kicked me out of the studio so that Fauci could be interviewed without me. It wasn't like, they did it at a different time, and it was, outside of normal scheduling, and we all had to go in special or something. No, they would have literally asked me to leave. So I was like, that's outrageous when I've been bringing you guys these views on this particular subject. You bring the guy on and you're not going to let me interview him. The audience will no longer trust you. And the audience, I have to say, so the issue is then I have to say something to the audience, because they're going to ask, Kim, why were you not on that interview? Why were you not on that interview? And I have to tell them the truth. I can't lie to them. So I'm going to tell them that you guys kicked me out of the studio, and then everyone's going to wonder why the hell I'm still here. So guys, you're putting me in a position where I can no longer be here. If you guys go forward with this interview, you're putting me in a position that the audience will ask, I will have to tell, and I will look like, a real loser if I stick around after that kind of abuse. So please don't do this. Make a different decision. Call the Fauci team back and tell them that I will be in that interview. I guess the Fauci team was like, who's going to be interviewing Fauci? And they asked like 5 times to make sure I was not going to be the interviewer. I said, you call them back and tell them, if you want the interview, Kim's on the interview. And when they back out of that interview, which they will, then we go live, we go on air and we tell everybody, and you get bigger views from that. But they ultimately decided not to do that. And obviously they went forward with the interview. I begged them, even after they did the interview, I said, guys, just don't air it. You still have time to reverse this mistake. You're making a grave mistake. I will not be able to be around. And this isn't because I'm threatening or thinking like, I'm so mad. What am I going to tell the audience? Like, this is about me and the audience now. You've now put me in a situation where you're going to ruin my reputation if I stick around.
Do you think they thought you might quit over that?
I think they did.
And do you think that they maybe felt that that was one bonus of doing it that way? Is that they could get rid of you without firing you, that you would quit?
They definitely did not. They did. They tried to get me back quite a bit.
Oh, so they expected you to stay. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. They thought I would just take it. I think
it's amazing.
It's amazing that they thought that, that I would give up my integrity and stick around for it, that I would. But I don't blame them for thinking that. So many do, so many do. So,
I mean, Kyle got boxed out of the Crystal Ball interview with Bernie, and they ended up getting married. So maybe they figure, hey, this isn't a deal breaker. Maybe she can bounce back from this and we can get along. Yeah,
exactly. So I think they were genuinely shocked. I gave them one last alternative. I said, when they tried to get me back after they aired it, and I said, I hate to do this because I don't want to be this person, but the only way I could stay and save face with the audience after this is if you fire whoever made the decision to kick me off of that interview. And then I could at least go to the audience and say, the person who made this bad decision is no longer here. I mean, that's the only option. But, I don't want to ask for somebody to be fired, but that's literally, you guys kept, kicking this and you kept pushing this and making the situation worse and worse and worse and worse. And now we're at this situation where whoever really did make this bad decision should not be here. And that was unfortunately a very good friend of mine. And I knew that at the time, but that was the situation. It was so stupid. I mean, the whole thing was stupid. It was a big mistake. They knew it was a mistake. They brought me back in a year later even. I mean, they kept asking me to come back. Even a year later, they were like, would you consider coming back? And I was like, I don't know. I don't think so. I'm busy now. I've got my show with Rumble that I'm doing full time. It's a lot of work. I don't think I could add this in. And, because they did eventually let go of all the people. So that's when they were asking me to come back.
Right. Well, it doesn't seem like they learned anything, though, because they kept doing it. Then they fired Katie.
Yeah.
And they just fired Brianna. And to your point, with that series of firings, they've so completely lost the trust of the audience. Nobody watches them anymore.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they definitely. I mean, for a mainstream media outlet, they are still better. And I also got in there during this weird year where there was like no adults in the room. They had gone through a transition where they sold the company about a month after I'd started filling in. And the owner, who really ran it single-handedly by himself, was no longer around. And he said, I don't know what they're going to do, but I've sold it now. So I'm taking my money and running. And then when they sold it off to Nexstar took a year before they really paid any attention to Rising. They were too busy taking over the print, a portion of The Hill and integrating them and trying to build out their own cable network station that they put together, which was News Nation. So they were so busy, they literally let us just run Rising on our own. There was literally no manager. So it was just the producers and us. And then 2 weeks earlier is when before the Fauci debacle is when they finally came around with management. And then that is when they got they secured the Fauci interview for Rising. I think it was management that secured that interview. And then they let the producers make the decision on whether or not we would go forward with the interview with me on it. But yeah, it was a really cool year where they really we didn't have any restraints on us because nobody was watching us. Like, I mean, everybody was watching us. A lot of people were watching us, but nobody was, nobody in management was watching over us.
Yeah, no supervision.
Yeah, we didn't have any supervision. So we really had freedom, like total freedom, just like it was under the older guy who owned it. And then Nexstar came along. But I think Nexstar, they've moved to a slightly, for out of mainstream, when you watch News Nation, they're definitely more open to differing viewpoints and discussions than other mainstream outlets. Like Chris Cuomo, I hate to ever give that guy praise, but there at the DNC convention, I don't know if you saw that clip where he's standing there and he's like, this isn't for you. Look at all of these boxes up here. They paid all this money and they're literally looking down on you here. That's the type of stuff that News Nation is putting. So, as a company, it's a good one, as far as like a mainstream outlet goes, a mainstream corporation. I think they're all going to have to learn, though, that that's the path forward if they want to stay alive.
All right. Well, before we wrap this segment for the clip, I'll just say that the vaccine does not stop the spread, but it does slow it down and helps prevent serious illness and death. All right. Now that word from our sponsors has been read, we don't get paid. Pfizer should really pay us for ad reads. If we have to say what they tell us, then we should really get some money for that. It's really very unfair, very, very unfair. So you are one of the few hosts in this space who is not audience captured, relentlessly non-audience captured. You do not allow your audience to dictate the tone and point of view of your content. And so, from being at war with what some would call blue MAGA, you've lately, as we have now as well, been sparring with the original red MAGA flavor. So this was a tweet that caught my eye. I believe I quote tweeted this, or at the very least replied to it. When the left went full on Trump derangement syndrome, I lost a lot of followers for telling them they'd lost the plot and gone nuts. Now it's the other side. Kim, you don't get it. Kim, you've lost the plot. Kim, you couldn't be more wrong. Heard this all before, guys. Yes, so have we. Let your fear be your guide, I suppose, but it won't lead you anywhere good. Case in point here, you opine I'm not voting for Trump or Harris, but for a variety of reasons, I hope Trump wins. That was not good enough for Dr. Malibu. Then just fuck off. What's the point of announcing it if you're going to do nothing? Disgusted either way with people like you. How many little girls do you want trafficked and raped? See, real charmers, these guys. They raped repeatedly as they stream across the border. Why don't you just go snort done fentanyl thinking it's E? Repeal the 19th Amendment. Cat ladies don't care about the privilege of selecting leaders. And you reply, and this is another reason why I won't vote for your team. The red hats have gone full derangement syndrome. We have noticed this exact thing. I don't know if it's because when Biden was swapped out for Kamala, they just couldn't resist the temptation to troll Kamala because of how ridiculous a person she is. And it brought out a lot of people who just cannot resist trolling a black woman or something like that. But definitely there has been a major tonal shift to the point where you're absolutely right. In 2016, MAGA were mostly happy warriors. There was a joy, odd word to bring up now, about that movement. And now they are just as shrill, just as humorless, just as dogmatic, just as incurious as the liberals. I've noticed the exact same thing. My theory is that they really feel like this is it for the country, and it's win or we're doomed. What is your theory? Why have they become as insufferable as the shit-lib counterparts?
For exactly the reason you just laid out. That's exactly it. When you get it in your mind that it's this now or never, that it's doom and gloom, that if Donald Trump wins, I mean, this is what happened with the Democrat derangement that they experienced was when they got Trump derangement syndrome was Trump is evil incarnate. He is going to destroy America. It won't be the same country. We won't have voting. We won't have rights. Nobody will have any choices and everything is going to be doom and gloom. And they really genuinely believed that. And it was just like what happened with COVID, right? We saw the fear take people over where they thought this thing is going to kill us. This is doom. This is the end, right? When people get into that mentality, they're willing to compromise a lot of their values, things that they otherwise stood for. We saw that happen with Democrats. Suddenly the pro free speech, they were always for live and let live. Everybody, let your freak flag fly, I guess, in a variety of different ways. Anybody could be different and that's okay. Like everybody's different, including, conservatives or whatever, somewhat, but they, in their minds. So they turned into these authoritarians that said, no, if you have a different opinion than me, you're dangerous and we have to silence you because you're going to end up voting for Trump otherwise. And we don't want this idea in your mind because you're going to vote for a literal Hitler is what they were thinking in their minds. And if you remember after 2016, there was that big, I believe in punching Nazis in the face, right? They would say that and they would, and they meant it. They meant like you should be able to go up to a MAGA hat wearing person and harass them and hit them and assault them, and it was terrible because they genuinely believed it was the end of the country, end of democracy. And that we saw that then for 4 years under COVID, but towards a different thing, towards a virus, right? And that caused everybody it caused what it caused. Right. And now we're seeing on the MAGA side, they believe now that the Democrats are evil incarnate. And it doesn't even make sense to me what they think is going to happen. When the guy talks about the sex trafficking of little girls, right? Or they'll talk about the trans movement. And I'm like, well, what does the president, so if Trump wins, what does he do about that? That's I mean, did trafficking not happen when Trump was in office the first time around? It certainly did. So, and the trans movement, that's not a government-led movement. I mean, you could say, well, it's in the schools or whatever. That's actually in the individual. It's the individuals in the communities who have a certain set of morals and ethics that make those types of decisions. That's not government mandated from the top, right? That's how a community, that's it. Those are inner things that you're not going to change through regulation and politics. So I don't, but they really just genuinely think that it's the end of the world. And it's not helping that there are sane people also saying it. You know, the people that have been the sane voices throughout the Maga, derangement that Democrats had, sane voices through COVID are now not, they're driving a lot of this. It's the end of the republic. I mean, you've got guys, like Brett Weinstein, who I really like Brett. I agree with Brett on so much, but I think that pushing this idea that this is the end of our republic and we need to rescue the republic, and that type of narrative, I think, is poisoning it's poisonous to our society. The thing that made what made things so awful under Democrats is the fact that they had that mentality. That mentality drove them to censoring us, to coming after us, to demonizing us, calling us terrorists, right? It was that mentality that caused all of that. So it wasn't Democrat policies fundamentally at the core of the Democratic Party. Some of them will think that, they're Marxists, so that's why. But really, it was the mentality of, we'll do anything to stop Trump. So if you're going to have this mentality, we'll do anything to stop Democrats and this liberal erosion of our society, you will go down that path. You will. I mean, you're just going to end up in an authoritarian space.
Yeah, I think that's extremely well said. We used to get on an almost daily basis in our YouTube comment section, because Russ and I are pretty squarely on the left, not subscribing to every piece of left orthodoxy there is, but generally we're very, very comfortable saying we are leftists. And we used to get on an almost daily basis people in the YouTube comments saying, hey, I'm Maga, I'm a Trump supporter, I'm a conservative, but I really appreciate you guys that you come at these issues in good faith and you're willing to call out your own side and you're willing to approach issues, with nuance and stuff. We used to get that almost all the time. Now we don't get it anymore. We hardly get that anymore, because now everybody who's MAGA, you're exactly right. They have formulated the same dynamic in their mind, that the other side is evil incarnate and it's crushed them at all costs. And that leads to a total breakdown in the discourse as a whole. So I thought that was perfectly said.
Yeah, because we've always expressed skepticism of a lot of woke ideology. We brought in a lot of that audience critiquing gender theory and DEI and that kind of thing. But then you say, hey, maybe people aren't turning into cats or anything, and they think you're the enemy now. Because you're challenging some bit of dogma. Now, I think that this is closely related, and something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Our space exists because people have lost faith in institutions. This whole space exists because people don't trust the media anymore. Now, you pride yourself on being willing to always ask questions, to question established narratives, and so do we. But with no authority that anyone trusts, it seems like it's opened up the floodgates for, particularly after COVID, for people to be very susceptible to going along with anything that anyone says that challenges any narrative. They don't really, I know in your case, you say you like to do the research, you like to go down the rabbit hole. Most of these people don't really do that. They don't have time to do that. But they are so hostile to institutional narratives, to accepted narratives, they'll go along with anything. And that opens up a lot of room for people with agendas to just promote ideas by saying, hey, everything you were ever told about the jab was wrong, right? So this, and this is wrong, so follow me.
Yeah.
Now, how do you think we walk that line and find a balance?
I think that the power players are so smart. We've got to somehow outsmart them. I saw this one coming a mile away, and it was I remember when I was invited to be on Glenn Beck's show, and he flew me out to Dallas. And while I was out there, I was asked to be on a variety of other shows that the Blaze has and in their facilities. And I was sitting on one woman's show. I forgot her name, but we ended up getting into a big beef online. She was a real jerk. And we were there, and she talked nonstop. This was a couple of years ago. So 2 years ago, she talked nonstop about, the kids and their sexualized, the stuff that we should absolutely care about, right? The sexualizing and or what they're teaching kids in schools or whatever. And she was going on and on and on about it. And I just basically said to her at the end, which really upset her, that this is not going to be a winning point towards she was advocating for all of the politicians to just adopt this talking and talk about this. And this would be the way to win elections. And I was like, it isn't. This won't win any elections. Ron DeSantis, and case in point, Ron DeSantis. I was just going to say. Yeah. It totally collapsed. He went down that road, the culture war road, and it collapsed his political career potentially entirely by taking that advice. But my argument was at the time, 2 years ago, if you guys adopt these types of talking points, then this is the distraction that the elites, that the establishment is going to feed you. They're going to feed you this as a distraction to get you all riled up, because who doesn't care about children? Right. Obviously, we all do. Everybody, believe it or not, even the real woke Dems really do care about kids. So that's how they're going to get you. They're going, just like what they did with the Democrats. Remember what it started with was racism, right? It was racism, right. Racism. Everybody's a racist. So who doesn't care about racism? Like, everybody doesn't want racists in our society. I told them, this is how they're going to get you. They're going to get you guys on the right. And I even had a conversation with James Lindsay about it online, where I'm like, look, you're leading people astray with this. This is not the path. I'm telling you now, you guys go down this road and you'll be co-opted before you know it. And the next thing you know, all of the things that people are attracted to the right for right now, it won't be the situation, because these guys are so smart. The establishment, the elites, they spend literal millions of dollars on psychology and figuring out the buttons to push in order to herd people towards where they want people to be. So they think, oh, you don't like surveillance? Oh, you don't like surveillance. Okay, so I see there's this big push against surveillance. So here I am. I'm like the big, multi-mega $1 million psychological, person that's trying to figure this out. Okay, well, how are we going to lead you down a path where you're going to accept surveillance? How about we start with, probably the kids? Okay, so we will push this narrative on you about the kids and what the kids are being fed in schools, or what with the mind stuff and what the kids are being taught and all this stuff, right? Eventually, you're going to say, well, I have to allow surveillance in order to protect my child. You don't get there from point A to B, but you do get there from point A to, J, right? Like, it just takes a few steps. But these guys are masterminds. They literally, that's their careers. They spend millions of dollars figuring that out. And they just know this is the messaging that leads to where we want people to go. And we want to get them all on board with CBDCs, or we want to get them all on board with surveillance, mass surveillance. We want to get them all on board with, giving up their freedoms, Patriot Act, like all these different things. They just figure out the buttons on each side that works. Each side's meant, everybody's the same as we're learning. Our brains are the same because we're all the same. We're just people. We just care about different things between left and right. So they literally could just use the same playbook on both sides. They just have to slightly alter the language in order to get everybody right where they want them. So here we are, and these guys have gobbled it up. And now we've got, they're believing in their mind, like, who was it I just tweeted out? Who's the billionaire that's wanting to, that backed, he backed Tim Scott, I think. Not the Palantir Peter Thiel, but the other guy that's Ellison. Is it? I don't know who it was. That was the big billionaire, but he's got like some tech that he's wanting to. Let me just check my Twitter profile real quick. And I tweeted out, yeah, this guy is a big Republican backer, by the way, Larry Ellison. So Larry Ellison is pushing an AI-fueled surveillance system to monitor citizens. Billionaire Oracle founder Larry Ellison claims AI will enable a vast surveillance system, ensuring citizens will be on their best behavior. As he's speaking to investors, he described AI's role in monitoring security cameras, police body cams, and more, suggesting AI drones could replace police cars and chases. He's a major Republican donor. So they've got, all they have to do is just tell the Republican base what they want to hear to get them to agree to this style of AI-fueled surveillance. The easy thing is to say, we're going to protect kids. This is how we're going to protect your kids.
Right. You look at a lot of this movement, and I'm really starting to delve into this. It's absurd for people to think that Silicon Valley billionaires have their best interests at heart. They really manipulate a lot of this culture war stuff. But there's a lot of reporting on their core philosophy being one of creating a kind of techno feudalism, where you have corporations that are fiefs and the people are the serfs, right?
Yeah.
You will own nothing and be happy. Like, that seems to be the uniting vision of our elites and our upper classes. And you just have two different sides pitching it to two different audiences, but in the end going to the same essential loss of freedom. But how do we in this space avoid, because we're challenging established narratives, but it seems like a lot of the online audience, it ends up making them unskeptical in a different direction. They're still not skeptical, but now they're skeptical of institutions and unskeptical of anyone who challenges institutional information. Everything that you've ever been taught must be wrong. Gravity, Newton was in the Illuminati. Anything you've ever heard, it must be wrong. This guy says it's wrong. It must be, because they taught it to me in school.
Well, what's crazy is when I posted this and said Larry Ellison is a Republican mega donor, so many people in the comments did exactly what you're describing, where they're like, "No, you're just full derangement. You got TDS now. You have TDS." I'm like, there's a guy who Trump owes a favor to, I was on Russell Brand's show yesterday with Mike Benz and Max Blumenthal. Mike Benz said the thing that I think everybody just needs to drill into their heads: you don't really elect the politician, you elect who they owe favors to.
Right.
So who does Trump owe favors to? Well, Larry Ellison, who gives billions of dollars and it's not just who the person, the Republican candidate owes or Democratic candidate owes favors to, it's the entire political party that owes favors. Because here's the thing, Trump is only protected, if he wins, he's only protected as president so as long as Republican Congress has his back. What did Congress just show? Congress just showed that they have so much power, they can remove a president, right? They do have that power to remove a president, but they literally just staged a coup against Biden. And what it finally took was Nancy Pelosi and Schumer coming along and saying, that's it, we're done with you. And you could either do this the nice way or you could do this the hard way. The hard way is going to be embarrassing for you. So do it the nice way, right? And we'll paint you a nice legacy and kind of make this warm and cozy for you and give you a nice send-off. They have the power to do that. So Trump is, if he wins, let's say, he's going to be fending off he's going to be tied up for one. He's going to be totally tied up because they're going to keep him tied up. So they're going to throw everything that they can at him to keep him tied up from not being able to enact any of his agenda. The Republicans in Congress, who are all completely bought off, are going to basically go to him and say, if you want our protection from impeachment, you want our protection from these cases, these criminal, from more lawfare, you want our protection, then you need to do it our way or we'll take you out to pasture, just like what we did with Biden. So there's that. We have to attack it from a whole, it's the whole. It can't just be one guy's going to save us. Right. What I'm finding online is that people seem to forget how our government works. And they think that the president has all the power when actually there are three equal branches of government. Like even when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war. Okay, I think it's important for those two countries to come to a peace agreement. I understand people think it may lead to World War III, and maybe it would, but there's a lot of other wars that would lead to World War III, like Taiwan or Iran, right? There's others out there, but just focusing on that one. So let's say Trump says, okay, I'm going to get in office and I'm going to halt arms sales to Ukraine. I'm going to force these two to the table. Congress could just say, screw you. We're an equal branch of government. We can actually override your decision to not give them weapons. All they have to have is a 2/3 majority.
Right.
Do we think that there are 2/3? Yes, there's absolutely a 2/3 majority in Congress that wants to continue giving weapons to Ukraine, right? On both sides of the aisle. They're in cahoots on that in Congress. So all they have to do is override them. Now, people might not realize that because it's actually never been done. Usually the president just gives as many weapons as the military industrial complex wants, and Congress is happy and everybody's happy. But when Biden withheld weapons to Israel, that was one of the strategies that Congress had, is that they basically went to Biden and said, again, we could do this the nice way or we could do this the hard way. Do you want us to embarrass you? We'll embarrass you. We will override your decision and we will make sure that Israel gets what it wants. So Congress has a lot of power and they'll wield it. So nothing is going to change unless we highlight and stress over and over, which many of us have been from the beginning when I was at least more identifying on the left as a staunch progressive, a Bernie Sanders progressive, was get the money out of politics. It always comes down to the money. We have to get the money out of politics. And until we can get the money out, not just from one guy, but the whole system, we're going to have this problem where you're going to get this savior guy that comes along and everybody thinks this is going to be our savior because he's going to do this, this, and this, and this. And it's totally and completely unrealistic because the blockade he's going to face with Congress is not just with Democrats, but it'll be with those staunch rhinos, as well. It'll be Republicans. It'll be the Mitch McConnells, his type, Nikki Haley types, right? The Lindsey Graham will be really the one leading the charge against him. And until people can wake up to that, just like Mike Ben said, it's just who do they owe favors to? And Trump owes a lot of favors. And he's going to keep owing favors because they're going to say, look, if you want our protection, you want us to pay for your lawsuits, like Miriam Adelson, right? You want me to pay for all of your lawfare that you're up against? Well, this is my favor. We want Israel. We want all the land. We want all the Palestine. So that's what you're going to have to give us. So he owes a lot of people and he's going to continue owing a lot of people.
All right. Well, we just went through a hypothetical where Trump wins. But you have pointed out, as have we, especially over these past couple of months, that there's a decent chance that despite this being a extraordinarily winnable election for Trump, he could very well lose. And part of why he might very well lose, I featured this tweet in our last live stream. You say this is another reason Trump will likely now lose because of all of the demagoguery around the Haitian migrants. And in this case, the just straight up refusal to condemn the bomb threats that have sort of sprung out of this frenzy. So I'm just going to play this short piece of video here so people know what we're talking about.
Do you denounce the bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio?
I don't know what happened with the bomb threats. I know that it's been taken over by illegal migrants, and that's a terrible thing that happened. Springfield was this beautiful town, and now they're going through hell.
Okay, so you, I think, very rightly point out that just that level of nastiness and hatred is alienating to normal people, to everyday, ordinary people, as is this piece of video from this prize here, who we're going to play in a little bit, which, by the way, I didn't know that you cleared out all of her shit from her studio and broke into her house, Kim. It looks like the same wall in back of you. Are you going to be feuding with Laura Gloom suit? Oh, you got the brick there. Never mind. Same color scheme, though. Yeah. But here she is. She's now Trump's top confidant, I guess. And, of course, rumors arose that they're having an affair, as I would assume, could be assumed that would happen, given who she is and who Trump is, if they're going to be, hugging and feeling each other in photos. And, of course, those rumors are going to get started. Here she is responding.
And it's disgusting the way that they're now spreading lies about me. The media now is accusing me of, having an affair with Donald Trump, such a salacious lie. So malicious, so disrespectful to Donald Trump and Melania Trump. They've taken it so far. And if I was a leftist journalist, if I was a Democrat, oh my God, the media would be up in arms if the Republican media was doing this to a left-wing journalist. Oh my God, they're misogynists. They're bullying a woman. They're trying to Monica Lewinsky her. They're demonizing her. They're trying to discredit the fact that she's a working woman. I mean, look, I know that Kamala Harris sucked dick to get where she is today, okay? And she had to sleep with Willie Brown in order to get to the top. But some of us women, right, we actually work hard. Some of us women have no desire to have sexual affairs with politicians or men with elite political status to climb the ladder. I know that Kamala Harris can't say the same, but, believe me when I say that that's not me. Or as Kamala Harris likes to say, they ain't like us, right? She ain't like me. I ain't like her. Okay, I don't suck dick to get to the top. That's what Kamala Harris does.
Okay, so the word of the year so far, I think, is weird. And there's a reason that when Tim Walz said these people are weird, there's a reason that caught fire. They are weird, and they're acting weird. In 2016, I had a feeling Trump might win because, I said, this reminds me, I was living in Brooklyn at the time, I wasn't in the suburbs, but I said, the person standing in back of me at the grocery store when I lived in upstate New York in the suburbs, I imagine that person as a Trump voter, as an ordinary person. I imagine they might, like what he has to say. Now I can't say the same thing. Now I live in the suburbs. Now I walk around every day. Ordinary people around me who are not hyper online all the time, who don't run down every rabbit hole that they're supposed to because of what's trending on Twitter that day. I can't imagine the ordinary person out here going out in mass, obviously some will, in mass, and pulling the lever for this ticket because, quite frankly, they act like a bunch of fucking freaks. Yeah. They just do. This is a level of meanness, nastiness, and weirdness, yes, that I think alienates the ordinary person. And I think you captured that in your tweet as well. So, what is your take on the probability of a Trump victory now? Because it seems like a toss-up to me.
I mean, unbelievable bad strategies. Whoever's running his campaign, if anybody, oh man. I mean, Kamala Harris, how is it that she's running a better campaign than Donald Trump when you've got a person who nobody liked? She had record low ratings as vice president. No one voted for her in 2020. She has no policies. She giggles. She can't answer questions straight. And yet her campaign strategy is brilliant for her, right? That is to get a candidate elected like Kamala, whoever is in charge of her campaign is doing a brilliant job. Keep her away from the microphone, right? Yep. So don't let her say anything stupid. So hide her away the way they do with Biden. Brilliant, right? You don't just let everybody believe the fantasy that maybe she's competent, right? And then just say, joy, it's going to be joy. Americans are so hungry for happiness right now after the 4 years of Donald Trump and the insanity that came with that from both sides, but mostly the Democrats, then COVID, and that Democrats also, it was mostly Democrats that kind of gave us these 8 years of misery. But now they're saying, oh, okay, we've changed. We're now joy. We're joy. And that is all people are just thirsty for right now. They just want a good life, a happy life. They don't want all this negativity. People are wanting to repair the relationships with their family members that they've been estranged from since the election of Donald Trump, because one voted for Trump and that caused division, and COVID caused division. And even though it's the very same people who caused the division who now suddenly don't want the division, they are at that point now where they're like, I just want to get along. And meanwhile, the Trump campaign is doing everything they possibly can to squander the gains that he got after the assassination attempt. That looked like a clear win. Donald Trump did the most American thing I think any of us have ever seen in our life. That was a moment. That was an incredible moment. Donald Trump getting up there and pumping his fist in the air after being shot. Like, that was, Americans saw that. All Americans. I don't know how you don't have just pride swell in you that this is an American. This is an American moment. And one of the greatest moments that'll go down in history. But how do you squander that?
Well, starting with the convention speech.
Oh, gosh. I mean, just it's all the hate. It's just when you focus on hate and negativity and everything's doom and gloom, or unless you vote for me, that is literally what lost Hillary Clinton the election. because that's what the rhetoric was. It was doom and gloom unless you vote for me because I'm your only option. It's either evil or me. And now they're running. I mean, how do they not realize that was it was Hillary's to lose. It was also Hillary's to lose, right? And she lost it by basket of deplorables talk. And here's Donald Trump doing the same thing. It's just, and in this country, we've got a lot of us that are not white, right? There's a lot of us that are from, our parents are from somewhere else. So when he starts attacking legal migrants, it's one thing to say we don't want illegal migrants. We want to curb illegal immigration. We want to do something about that. But when you start attacking legal migrants,
right,
then, because a lot of people sided with a lot of brown people, black and brown people sided with Trump when it came to illegal immigration. But the minute you start picking on the legals, the people that are brown, that are here, black or brown, and they're legal, that is a line too far for a lot of Americans. And America is increasingly not white, which I guess is what some people on his side are trying, fear mongering about is, oh no, America's not going to be white. We got to, so they're going to, it's just such bad campaign tactics. Somebody needs to put a gag in the guy's mouth. Just don't let him say anything or tweet anything. And but it's also JD Vance. It's a lot of them, and Laura,
right.
It's they're all doing it now.
Well, I think there's a massive disconnect between the online world and the real world. And this is kind of a theme of the overall conversation that we've been having. There are a lot of people who think that because negativity plays well online, because it does, it drives engagement, it drives numbers online, that it plays well in real life. And it doesn't. The average person is not a gutter rat swimming around Twitter picking fights with people. The average person just wants to send their kid to school in the morning without, maybe a bomb threat will be called in today because of the insanity dredged up around this issue. This is the other irony. Trump has brought more instability and more chaos to Springfield, Ohio by bringing this up than if he had just left it alone. The town's in worse shape now. They just canceled Community Day because they don't want a maniac to show up. Like, it has been just absolutely shockingly self-destructive. And because the Democrats are so bad, there's a 50-50 chance he'll win anyway.
Yeah, I think it's less than that now. I think he's really, unless something happens, I don't see him at this. Well, I thought that it was a landslide. After the assassination attempt, this guy's going to win by a landslide. But now I don't see him winning. I think a lot of people just won't show up to vote. I just don't think people are going to show up. There's just no inspiration. But I do think that the Democrats who do not want Donald Trump will show up and they'll vote Kamala Harris. But I think all of the independents he could have grabbed, who are fed up with Democrats, don't want to vote Democrat. I think he could have gained all those independents, and I think most of them are just not going to show up. So I think we're going to see record low voter turnout this election. People that I know who voted in every election are saying, I'm just not going to vote. I'm hearing that from when I go to the bar and I talk to people or around, my inner circle, my family members, even who've always been proud to vote, are saying, I just don't think I'm going to vote this year.
Well, when we were just out in Chicago, when I was asking Muslims if they were voting, they all said Jill Stein. So the numbers that just came out did not surprise me. Every single one of them said Jill Stein.
So that's why maybe Kamala would lose, right? Is because Jill Stein, and then they'll blame it on Jill Stein.
And then
Poor Jill. Oh man, she's a battle warrior. You got to give it to Jill that she's willing to put herself through that over and over and over again. That woman is tough as nails. I really like Jill Stein a lot. She's a genuine person.
I mean, I think you're
what
right.
This country
that she
needs.
will. I think you're right. I think you're right. The first time, should I say? I think Jill Stein is doing very well among Muslim voters. Which doesn't surprise me, but I think you're right. I think Trump has depressed turnout so much on his own side that if I had to guess right now, despite the polls being, mathematically pretty much a dead heat with the Electoral College being a slight advantage Trump, I would say my gut is that he's going to blow it. And my gut was that he was on his way to blowing it 2 months ago when they switched to Kamala. As soon as we started hearing the DEI memes and all that shit, I'm like, okay, here we go. They're off message. They're going to stay off message. These people cannot resist. And so they're going to blow it. Yeah.
Yeah, they start attacking women, right? Childless cat ladies.
Cat ladies. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just not. Then you start going down that deplorables road, and that is what killed it for Hillary. When you start calling people deplorables, That is not and then say, I hate Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Like, why would you say that about an American?
Yeah, why would you
That's an
say
American citizen, and you're going to be her president. You're trying to be her president and the president for all the Swifties, you know, and it's just such the negativity and the hate, you know, that there was a time I considered voting for Trump, but now, I mean, there's no way I'm voting for hate. I'm not, you know, I'm not going to vote for it. And that's the thing is, you know, here I am, somebody that's online all the time, totally ingrained in politics. And yet even I am turned off by hate at this point. Like, it's just such a automatic reaction where I'm like, I don't want a hateful person.
Yeah.
Kamala smiles and giggles, you know, so I don't know. I mean, I would still rather have Trump only because, you know, if I had to choose between the two, realistically, I know I'm voting for Jill Stein, but realistically, I know it's going to be either Trump or Kamala, right? So being a rational person, then it's okay. Well, then out of those two, who do I hope wins? I guess I honestly don't think anything's going to actually. Things are going to be worse under Donald Trump for us. That doesn't mean we shouldn't suit up for battle. It doesn't mean I'm not ready for it. But things, you know, there's that whole crowd, the kind of Rescue the Republic crowd, that's thinking that if Donald Trump wins, and I understand the logic, if Donald Trump wins, he's going to put in all these great people in the administration. He's going to, you know, clear out all of these, you know, like he's going to put Bobby Kennedy in the HHS.
RFK is going to ban American cheese.
Right. Who needs it? Yeah. So like there's all of these things that people are thinking Trump's going to do. He's going to end the war in, you know, between Russia and Ukraine. He's going to XYZ things. And these are all great things that, you know, I agree they need to be done. And so I agree with the chatter about it. But realistically, that won't happen. Again, he doesn't have control over Congress. Congress has to, for one, you know, put everybody in. They have to approve every single person that he wants to put into his cabinet. They won't. And also the censorship regime against us is going to ramp up under Trump. It's not because Trump and his team is doing it. It's because that's the reaction, and Trump doesn't get to choose the CEO of YouTube. He doesn't get to choose the CEO of Amazon or the CEO of Apple or the CEO of, you know, he doesn't get to choose these CEOs that make these decisions from their own political viewpoints of what they think is good for America and the future. You know, the rich billionaires who are in charge and wanting all this AI surveillance and whatever. He doesn't get to choose the CEOs for BlackRock, for example. He doesn't get to choose the new leader of the World Economic Forum. He doesn't get to choose the leaders of all the other Western nations. So he's up against all of that, and all of that is up against all of us. And if he wins, they will ramp up against us. Those forces will ramp up because they don't want him to succeed. They will do everything they can to ensure he doesn't have any success in 4 years so that people totally turn away from the Maga populist movement and that they go back towards sanity in their minds, right? They will do everything they can to crush us. So to think that Trump winning, we're suddenly going to have this, it's bull. I mean, it's going to get every independent media creator, anybody who speaks up against the establishment better get ready to suit up for battle if Trump wins. Kamala wins, it's the same. We're going to have the same sort of battle we're in now. But I'm telling you, with Trump winning, it'll be 10 times, 100 times worse even as they crack down on us because they won't be able to believe that Trump won again. And they'll go after us just like they did the first time around, but it'll be harder. So I don't think, Trump winning, but that being said,
so it sounds like what you're saying. I just want to make this so you're the they in this scenario that Trump wins, and I've made this point as well. The they would be the tech companies themselves because they're so dissatisfied with the result. If Kamala wins, she will compel the tech companies to censor speech just like Biden has. But you're saying if Trump wins, they'll take it upon themselves to do it because they'll be so freaked out that Trump won. That's how Alex Jones got kicked off right after Trump won. YouTube said, "Oh, we got to do something about this guy." Is that what you're saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just want to. Yeah,
I'm saying I think people overestimate the government influence on the censorship.
Right.
I think a lot of that comes from just the inner values of the people in Silicon Valley. Like they are in alignment. So when the government says to them, "Hey, we've got this threat. We think this group is dangerous," it doesn't take a lot of arm twisting for the Silicon Valley people to go along with that and say, "Oh, okay." I mean, YouTube, we've never gotten any YouTube files, have we? Where are the YouTube files? So with YouTube, they censored, I was getting censored back in 2019 before this before Democrats were in power. Trump was in power and I was being censored by YouTube. Was that because of Trump and his administration directing YouTube? No, it was YouTube making YouTube choices, right? So these guys, these people will make their own choices. That is, so they have the control and the power. So it's not going to be the administrations. Even Kamala Harris, maybe, the bully pulpit, there is a bit of that, but otherwise, I think it's these companies that are going to be doing it. So things are going to be worse because these people that hate him or don't want to see him unravel institutions that are making them extremely wealthy, they're going to come after us big time. But that being said, Democrats don't deserve to win at all. What they've done to us over these last 8 years of their rhetoric against Trump, the lawfare against ripping away democracy from us, the COVID pandemic, like everything Democrats have done, they don't deserve the win. So I personally, out of the two, prefer Trump wins, but only not because I think the world will be better. I think it'll be worse, but only because I really do not think Democrats should be rewarded for their behavior. But Trump is, the way he's acting, it's like, man, now you don't deserve it for the way you're behaving. But he's just got a mouth on him. The Democrats have done so much against us for so long.
And also, I would just make the point. I mean, the worst of COVID, starting with the CARES Act, which was the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. Trump was president to sign it. That was very much a bipartisan deal. Everyone voted for that.
Except Thomas
so it really
Massie.
is. Except, yeah. So a pox on both their houses in that respect, I think.
Yeah, this is a very interesting perspective you're bringing to it, because we are seeing a lot of people who are so frustrated with the Democrats. They're assuming that, well, at least with Trump, he's not going to get us into war. He's going to settle things in Ukraine. The censorship will be better under Trump. And you're saying no. I mean, nobody's really saying that. Even people who are skeptical of Trump. You're the only person I've really heard say, no, actually, it won't be better.
No, it'll be worse. It will be worse. We have to prepare for it to be worse. It'll be worse. But again, it doesn't, I think that's the conundrum there. Is the issue is, but Democrats we can't let them win by using the tactics they've used. That's right. To me, that's worse for us overall. If we have to put up with 4 years of the barrage that they're going to throw at Trump and all of us, then we have to suit up for battle and prepare for that. Right. What Democrats, what I don't really want to see them is, I don't want to see them rewarded for this behavior that they've enacted, because I think in the long run, that's actually more dangerous for our democracy. If we're going to use that type of language, it just is more, it's kind of like they've enacted a new type of Patriot Act that we're never getting rid of, and I would like to get rid of it. So I don't think I just think that they shouldn't look at these tactics and think, oh, that worked. Okay, great. We'll keep doing that. You know?
I mean, I totally sympathize with that point. If it works, the only reason it will have worked this time is because, as you said, Trump doesn't deserve to win either. There's got to be accountability on both sides of this. If there is to be an anti-establishment coalition that can, just knock down the gates and seize power the way they did to a certain extent in 2016 when he won, that takes discipline. It takes strategy. That takes a level of coordination and maturity, quite frankly, that they're not displaying right now. You have to have your shit together if you want to win. That's just the bottom line. Now, Trump could talk about how rigged the system is against him, and I would agree. Look, he survived his second assassination attempt this week, so obviously they don't want him there. But if you're going to do this, you've got to do it. At the end of the day, it falls to you to have your shit together, and they don't. And so, what could I say? If Kamala wins, it's not so much rewarding her for the great job that Joe Biden has done. It is a rejection of something that most people at the end of the day could very well see as more ridiculous. And it's on Trump that he's been more ridiculous. He just has been. You know what I mean? there's got to be accountability there too. That's why I wash my hands of it, obviously. And I'm not saying you're voting for Jill Stein. I'm probably going to be like your friends and not vote at all, honestly. If I do vote, I'll probably write in Jill Stein. I can't vote for her on the ballot because they didn't get the signature drive together in New York to be on the ballot. But it is a hopeless situation as far as I could see.
And of course, Democrats aren't going to view it that way, right? They're not going to view it as this is a vote just against, it's not because you've won. They're going to be like, we won. Our tactics worked.
Well, of course. Well, that's the thing. Yep. Power consolidation. Go ahead.
When the appellation weird is sticking to you, when it's being thrown at you by the leather daddies for tots crowd, you've really gone weird, man.
Yes.
When they first rolled it out, I was like, that's never gonna work. They're so weird themselves. Look at Kamala, she's cackling.
These people flooded the streets in pussy hats from coast to coast, and the Republicans have out-weirded them.
Yeah.
Are we going to do Sam Harris, Russell?
But it's really Harris. They're just the joy. I mean, and that's a working strategy. Her campaign's very bright. They're very, very smart to put the joy. Smile. Yes. Tim is looks like a happy grandpa, and Kamala's just there and looking nice and pretty and waving and smiling and embracing, and that's people ultimately are just gonna. They don't want the guy that's going to say, cause division in America. People are very fed up with it.
Kamala's got David Plouffe on the team, one of the Obama masterminds. Say what you want about him. He is not stupid. Very, very smart. Yep.
All right. So now you've spoken out a lot particularly lately, about the hypocrisy of what some would call the intellectual dark web people, the anti-woke conservatives, who all seem to have an Israel carve-out for everything they believe. So Sam Harris, this just dropped. He illustrated what I think you're talking about as well as it's ever been illustrated. So let's take a look.
Reversing it. I mean, just imagine the Jews of Israel attempting to use their own women and children as human shields against Hamas on October 7th. Picture the attitudes of the Hamas fighters if they were confronted with that stratagem. I mean, it's impossible from either side. There's no way Hamas fighters would expect it to happen. There's no way the Israelis could do it. If they did it,
Hamas would think it's like they've hit the jackpot.
It would just be the most grotesque Monty Python skit you've ever seen. I mean, it is a masterpiece of moral surrealism. I mean, it's just like all the Jews would die, and the jihadists would look at one another like, "Can you believe what were they thinking? Like they thought that was going to stop." But the whole point was to kill as many of them as possible, right? But the strategy only works to the degree that it does because there's this moral asymmetry in the value placed on innocent human life, and that asymmetry should matter to everyone, to all of Israel's critics, knowing that it works only because of the heightened civilized and civilizing sensitivities of a Western audience. What's amazingly cynical about this is the jihadists know that we care more about the lives of their children than they do, and they're consciously weaponizing that against us. And by us, I mean all of civilized humanity that is not part of a death cult that views it as a win to have people die in whatever numbers because they're going straight to paradise.
Now, of course, this is extremely bizarre, watching these people who present themselves as public intellectuals, presenting these just insane arguments. We've been watching a genocide in real time for 10 months, 11 months now, and you're making the case that Israelis are much more concerned about innocent human life. We're seeing children starving to death, dying of disease, having no water. You're just, to get one terrorist, you're just bombing entire refugee camps. You're bombing the safe zones. How do you make an argument like that?
Yeah, he definitely hit there were three things he said in there from that clip that were just bonkers in reasoning. The first one being, the Israelis don't use their children as human shields. No, it's that they do, actually, by their own definition of what a human shield is. It's not like the Palestinians are literally grabbing their children and running around with them in front of them as actual human shields. They're claiming because Hamas is embedded within the society, right, that the children are just automatically human shields. Well, every Israeli is an IDF member practically. So by that logic, if you're going to say, look, anybody whose military is a target, that's the entirety of the Israeli, that's almost the entirety of the Israeli society. That would be a target. And they do have their own bases built below Jerusalem. They've got bases that bunkers built all throughout that region underneath the human. So that's there. So that right there saying, well, the Israelis don't use human shields. It's like, no, you do. You do it in the same exact way. You just, especially with conscription and everybody being an IDF target, right? Now you've put everybody at risk by doing that in Israel. The second thing that he says there with the, well, imagine if we did that, then they would just eradicate all the Jews. And then, but of course that would be the plan. So that's, and it's like, well, that's what you guys are literally doing.
Exactly.
You're calling them human shields, blowing them all up because your goal is to eradicate all of these people.
Of course. He's describing the actual tactics of Israel as some hypothetical, if the shoe were on the other foot and Hamas did this you're describing what is going on. Saying that, well, it's genocidal. It would be genocidal thinking, but that's what they have. They have genocidal thinking. So they would just wipe us all off the face of the map with their genocidal thinking. It's like, well, okay, you've just described yourself. And then that last part about him saying, we care about children. They know we care about children. And so that's why they do this. And it's like, no, you don't care about children at all. That's why you do what you do, despite the fact. And then you just use as an excuse to do what you do. Well, they use kids as human shields. So what if all these kids died? Whoops, too bad for you. I mean, they're not even trying to get away from the bombing kids. This class, it's very interesting to see nearly 100% of the intellectual dark web have this. They suddenly, when it comes to Israel, their brain rots. I mean, Dave Rubin has blocked me on Twitter. He just thinks I'm terrible for it. It's just, they cannot see, for whatever reason, something about, and I don't know. Is it possible that they're all bought off? I think there's a real possibility that there is a lot of money flowing, and they know that if they make a criticism, that money will stop. And the reason I think that is because I was a guest. I'm not going to say which show it was, but I was a guest on a big show at one point, and I went to the studio, and we weren't even on air yet. And this was a couple of years ago after I had just come back from the West Bank, and I'd come back from the West Bank just a bit earlier, a couple of months. And I brought up Israel just in casual conversation with some of the producers. And they immediately said, we're pro-Israel here. We're really pro-Israel. Really, really, really pro-Israel. And they were dead serious. And it was very weird. It was like, what in the world? So they knew if they said anything different, the money would go away.
Right.
It wasn't even listening to what I had to say at all. It was just... And it was it felt artificial, like they weren't genuinely pro-Israel. They just were like, oh, no, we're pro-Israel here. We're pro-Israel. We super weird.
Well,
I think they're all bought.
Sorry, go ahead, Russell.
It seems like also, though, a lot of them, because I followed and appreciated a lot of the ideas of a lot of these people until October 7th. Because they always emphatically said, look, I'm one of those who feels that the idea that Western civilization is uniquely foul or uniquely prone to evil. I've always spoken against that as throwing out the baby with the bathwater, that you should take some of the best ideas. And that has tended to be their argument. And they have emphatically argued it's not that we're Western chauvinists, is that we're saying there are certain things in Western culture that should be preserved. And, that's something I agreed with. And after October 7th, their defense of Israel revealed them to just be bargain basement Western chauvinists. Well, they're a democracy in the Middle East, which they're not. They are protectors of Western values. Well, in the worst sense, sure. I think that's part of it. I think it is partly what you're saying with some of them. I think there are some commentators who, I mean, you know, Kim, there's a whole network of speaking engagements that a lot of people make their living off of. And they don't, a lot of it is controlled by that money. And if they start speaking about that, they're not going to get those gigs.
Yeah, I think it's mostly that. I got to say, I've got a lot of friends inside of the libertarian and the Republican sphere, and some of them my very, very close friends. And I just think that they are worried about opportunity loss. I don't think that they're necessarily getting, like, perhaps this one show was actually getting quite a bit of money and funding from a very pro-Israel Zionist source. So that's why they were like really quick to say, no, we're pro-Israel. But I think the others, it's a form of being bought off, right? Because it's a lot, you know, you're just going to lose up. You're going to end up like Candace Owens, where you get shunned by everybody, right? If you speak up. And that is what they're afraid of. And one thing I've always respected about the Republican side and the talkers on the right is they're business minded. They want to make money. Whereas on the left, it's always been hard to kind of like get all of the leftists together to build something that's actually going to make money. You know, it's more like, no, it's more activism, you know, being like an activist journalist rather than. And so a lot of these other guys are actually trying to make money. And I always thought, well, you know, at least they're approaching it like a business and whatever. I mean, both ways are great, but.
Hey, hacky sack on the Great Lawn at 3.
So I think, they think about the whole of their business as they're going forward and the things that they say, and they know that they won't get the book sales or even the publisher. They won't get the speaking engagements. They won't be invited to the conventions. That if they are one of the prominent names listed by certain organizations and they're paid to be part of those organizations, they're going to lose those opportunities. And they fundamentally don't want to lose their money-making income, and they make a lot of money on the right. I mean, they make millions and millions of dollars. So there's a lot to lose. So I think that's what's driving most of it.
All right.
Some of it though is ideological. I think with Dave Rubin, it's like genuinely ideological. And Ben Shapiro, I think that's ideological.
Well, yeah, Dave Rubin is genuinely a fucking moron, and Ben Shapiro is genuinely an evil Zionist maniac. Yeah.
All right. Well, that perfectly segues into our final question. There's a perfect fusion of where we started and where we're ending up. It combines part of what you were fighting with them at the Hill about with the intellectual dark web. So I went to the Dissident Dialogues in May, which, if you're not aware of it, it was basically an IDW conference. It was Dawkins was the big headliner. You have McWhorter there and all these major, Hersey Alley, all these major figures from that world. And something that struck me, it was very eye-opening for me. Keaton, he started out kind of one of these new atheists. So he was a little more hip to this scene than I was.
Yeah, I had run through the cycle. I had run in and out of the forest.
Yeah, I had never been one of those people. But one of the things they were obsessed with at this conference was something that you spoke about on the Hill. They were obsessed with the Uyghurs. They were obsessed with this. They had a whole side display about how your food may be made by forced labor in China. Now, they didn't say a word about the fact that if you go to a McDonald's in Arkansas, the person serving you your food might be prison labor. They had not a word to say about anything like that. And generally, Israel aside, like there's a lot of focus on Israel now for obvious reasons. But this IDW scene has a general foreign policy that could have come off a memo from Antony Blinken. They're not one deviation from all the standards. Iran, China, they were the barbarity of the Muslim world. Like all of this stuff could have come from the State Department. So what are your thoughts about the Uyghur narrative? I know you looked more into it after that happened on the Hill. And why is this pushed so hard in this crowd? Why do they push? They're supposed to be dissidents, right? Dissidents, but absolutely no dissidents on foreign policy at all.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, that show that I went on where they said, we're pro-Israel, they also were very much demonizing China about the Uyghur situation. Right. So yeah, there's definitely, the war machine is smart. And just like what we were talking about, how they figure out the messaging to get people, oh, you don't like the Russia war. Okay, well, we got another one for you. How about China? Oh, you don't like
Right.
that one? Well, for sure, Iran, right? That one will
Right.
get you to support war. So they figure out what it is that's going to get us to support war. What is it that we're afraid of? It's that fear, feeding off of that fear, and then just going down, continuing and feeding on that with people. Even though, what exactly is the threat from China? When I ask people that, what exactly is our threat from China? When I ask China, hawks, and they say, well, China's not a free country for the Chinese people. And I'm like, well, and then they'll bring up the Uyghurs. And it's like, okay, again, what about me as an American right here? What is it that I should be afraid of with China? Should I stop buying goods from China? Is that what you're telling me? Like, what is it exactly that you want us to do? And they can't actually answer that. So it's clearly an op, to brainwash people into believing that, then, to get people that they're sowing the seeds now so that when things calm down with Russia or Israel, we'll have another war ripe and ready. And it's going to be
Right.
China.
Right.
And
Right.
then we can start doing, shifting all the military industrial complex money towards China. Even though, what is it exactly we want to protect Taiwan for? Like, why do we want to do that? So, with the Uyghur messaging, I mean, look, fighting radical ideology is challenging. And there's a lot of discussion on who gets to decide what is radical ideology. Like in this country, we're having that conversation because the FBI is rounding up like Catholics and stuff. So the first, it's a big philosophical question that I think here in the West, we have the luxury of debating how you deal with radicals because we don't really have any here. We don't have a border with a country that's littered with, Wahhabi ideology or something. China and the Uyghurs, and the American strategy on fighting radicalism has been to bomb them. That's what we've done for years and years. We go to the Middle East and we just bomb them. And we think that's going to de-radicalize them. Our method of de-radicalization is to eradicate, right? China took a different approach. They tried to round them up, put them in camps, and brainwash them out of it. Brainwash them out of what they believed was brainwashing. So they put them in re-education camps. Some of them rightfully belonged in prison because they were actual terrorists and had committed crimes of terrorism. Others were they had a belief system, and China decided to do it that way. Do I think that's wrong to round people up for just their beliefs? Yes. But I also have the luxury, being an American, not having terrorists really, truly on my border that I have to deal with. I don't have ISIS growing on my border. So, it's a question of how do you deal with those radicals? That's the way China chose to do it. That's the way a lot of the Nordic countries do it. My grandfather, I'm Vietnamese. My grandfather served 4 years in a re-education camp after he fought for the South. And they lost, and he got rounded up and put into a re-education camp. So the narrative that these are like genocide camps is not true. Is it a lack of free? Are people's rights being ripped away? Are their freedoms being ripped away? Yeah. It seemed to have worked, so that's the thing. China doesn't have that problem anymore. Most of the people are no longer in these prisons unless they committed actual acts of terrorism. Most of them went and got good jobs, and now that region is flourishing, and the Uyghur people are flourishing. So
Yeah,
the narrative is, what's that?
They came out based.
Yeah, they came.
We'll just make them based.
Yeah, well, so, I don't know. I certainly, if I had to choose, and even with my own family's experience with my grandfather, I choose a re-education camp over death, over being bombed. That's what I choose. My grandfather lived a life after he got out of re-education camp. He was fine and free and lived his life and until he died, a free man after being re-educated. So, it's complicated because it definitely hits on a lot of the things that we debate about, like what is a freedom, what rights a person should have, freedom of religion, freedom of organizing and thought, and all of these things. But I don't know. I mean, I just, again, I look at it like it's not my country, my problem. So they are dealing with their problems in their ways. We deal with ours in a way I don't agree with, which is bombing children and bombing people.
Well, you make a very good point. It's interesting between China and the USSR because they went and executed a lot of their class enemies, whereas the Chinese saw them as being redeemable. And as much as you might critique, as I do, the idea of a re-education camp, as you say, it's not our culture, it's not our country. And what do we do about people that we don't ideologically like? That's a very good point.
Well, and also the Europeans, by the way, are having to adopt the Chinese model by force, because the issue with China is that these Uyghurs are Chinese citizens. So it's not like China could just deport them. They had to deal with their, and they shouldn't bomb their own citizens, right? So they had to come up with something. And the Europeans, with ISIS disbanding and a lot of those ISIS fighters being Europeans that were recruited and went over to Europe, the Europeans have now done the same thing China's doing. They're basically re-educating these people. And they were like, for a while, they were like, we don't want them. And then these countries like Turkey was like, you have to take them. They're your citizens. They're French. You have to take them. They're German.
Right.
You have to,
Right.
We're not keeping them here. You got to take them. So figure out what you're going to do with this wife and child of this terrorist ISIS fighter. You got to figure it out. And that has been a real conundrum for the Europeans as they've condemned China to try to go along with this like war narrative. And now they're like, well, I guess maybe we put them in re-education camps. I don't know. Yeah. What else are you going to do?
All right. Well, Kim Iversen, we got a hard out coming up in just over 60 seconds. So you can find Kim Iversen on YouTube and Rumble, and at Kim Iversen Show on X. Great to meet you. We'd love to have you on to talk again soon. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Please clap.